In this section here, normally referred to as the story of Balin and his brother Balin, we see a lot going on. There's a lot of activity going on and various quests that are being created. The first thing that we notice is that a lady comes to the court and she has a sword girt to her. And she requests that somebody draw the sword from the sheath. And this is a repeat of what happens earlier with the drawing the sword out of the stone, where Arthur draws the sword magically out of the stone and it presages the fact that he's going to be King of England. This sort of a repetition, this reduplication, happens throughout the text. Reduplication is simply within a text where an image keeps coming up over and over and over again, as though the author is reiterating or emphasizing a certain type of image. He wants us to focus not so much on the detail of the type of sword or anything like that. He wants us to focus on what does this image represent. The drawing out of the sword from the stone that Arthur does as a youth is here repeated, but in this case, Arthur can't draw the sword out of the stone. The young lady is the representative of the stone, so to speak, and the sword with the scabbard is the sword and the anvil, same type of image as before. Instead, what happens in this section is that along comes Balin, and Balin is a man who's recently been released out of jail. And Balin comes forward. He's a man who's obviously broken and who is very humbled by his experience. And he draws this sword from the sheath, from the side of the lady. And it's a miracle. Wow, the lady is freed from this curse. And so he does this great thing of releasing her from the curse. Unfortunately, right after it, she says, "Give me back the sword, because I need that sword and you'd be a fool to keep it because it's going to hurt you and everybody else around you." And Balin says, "Well, no, I want to keep this sword." And immediately we have difficulties, we have problems. We have the young lady being slain. We have the Balin going on to slay various people. Lanceor, for instance, is killed. So that the sword that he draws forth causes all sorts of chaos. One thing to note here is that if the sword and the stone is reduplicated in the image of the lady and the sword, we also have a reduplication of Arthur in the form of Balin. And we also have then Arthur's uniting of the troops together, so to speak, in order to create this society at Camelot. We have that reduplication in the events surrounding Balin. And Arthur's problems with women seem to be reduplicated in Balin's problems with women. Why, for instance, does he, after he fights Lanceor, why does he then stand by while Lanceor's beloved, Colomba, comes forth and kills herself right in front of Balin? He has that issue. He has the issue of slaying the lady who had brought the sword to the court in the first place. And his killing of the lady is only mildly put off by the fact that Merlin says, well, she was a bad lady, she was cursed. And so the whole court as a collective, good thing, because otherwise killing a lady, that's expressly against the code of chivalry. But in this case, the killing of the lady in some ways is again like a foreshadowing of what's going to happen later with the whole breakdown of Camelot due to a lady. And it's going to foreshadow later what happens with Lancelot and his beloved Elaine. And it reduplicates what has come before with Arthur and his issues with women. Two things to note in this. One is that our author here, Malory, himself spent time in prison and so was working in many ways from his own experience. He knew what prison was like and how awful it was. Prison in those days was you thrown into a hole and maybe thrown a crust of bread occasionally. It wasn't this luxurious at all place. It was not something where you were free at all, and it was in some ways like being down in a hole. Well, Malory was certainly chastised by being in jail, and he probably had that as an image that he wanted to bring to the text. So when Balin is released from jail, we get an image of something that Malory was thinking about. What does it mean to be imprisoned? I think also that changed Malory's opinion of what chivalry was all about. This image that all chivalrous people are great and good and noble. In this case, Balin, who gets out of jail, is not good and great and noble. He's a guy who's been imprisoned and now is the only one who can actually save the court from this quest or this journey that's brought to them. The other thing I think that is important to note is that Malory is very concerned with the image of women in the text. How do women play into the formation of society? Why are women important in the formation of society? Can men by themselves form a society? Or are men even willing to form a society without women? It's intriguing to note that when men are alone together, frequently they fall to the lowest common denominator. It's like the guys that go up on the fishing trip. The fishing house is normally a place filled with alcohol or smokes or the smell of not bathing for several days. Guys together normally talk a certain way and act a certain way. When women come around, it changes the whole tenor of how things are. And it could be speculated that without women, there would be no civilization. Without women, there's no purpose or point to continuing the race or making beautiful things or constructing an ordered or organized society. So when Malory depicts this organization of this society, women are central to that organization. They are the very reason for chivalry. Now, of course, in the chivalric code, honoring women is one of the top things that knights are supposed to do. The code of chivalry, which was put down by various different authors in different forms, generally had a few points that were common to all those different authors. One was that a knight should honor God, that a knight should be obedient to his lord, that a knight should treat others with honor and mercy, that a knight should take care of the weak, and fifth in my list, but really very prominent on the list, was that a knight should honor women. He should honor ladies. It's where we get the very term of chivalry, acting chivalrously. The cheval, or the horse, is how the knights acted. They were chivalrous. And so this code of chivalry was a treating of God and Lord and the weak, but also as a treating of women as central to the civilization that the knights were trying to establish. The question then comes up, how does this scene of Balin drawing the sword out of the lady's scabbard, drawing order out of chaos, if you will, how does that scene go back to this idea that women are central to the formation of society? How does the woman who brings the sword, the damsel who brings the sword to the court, how is she reduplicative of the women we've seen prior? In what way is she foreshadowing the later characters of Elaine and Guinevere? And how does Balin's unfortunate activity afterwards, the slaying of the woman, the slaying of Lanceor and the death of Cullum, how do those activities in some ways embody the almost inevitable collapse of society? Malory was very keen on this idea. Society is created out of a great deal of difficulty to form. It's created out of chaos and disorder and violence, lots of bloodshed. And it takes a very strong man, a leader like Arthur, to create a society. And yet all societies, Malory seems to conclude, all societies collapse. They fall apart. They fall into ruin because that's human nature. That's the way things are. Even the greatest societies are going to fall apart. And just as women are central to forming the societies, Malory suggests that women end up being central to their falling apart as well. That violence and violence towards women or violence caused by women becomes the thing that causes the whole group to fall apart. In this, notice that the young lady who comes into the court is a reduplication of previous images. And notice also that she's a foreshadowing of later images. And that drawing the sword out of the stone, drawing the sword out of the lady's sheath, the scabbard, is itself an image which the author wants us to focus on. It is important to the story.